Dann herzlich willkommen und einen wunderschönen guten Abend zum diessemestrigen städtebaulichen Kolloquium bei uns an der TU Dortmund. Und ich darf auch ganz herzlich Reza Afisina von der ruangrupa begrüßen, den ihr jetzt hier alle noch nicht sehen könnt, aber der sozusagen schon heute online unser Gast sein wird und auch den ersten Vortrag halten. Genau, ich darf auch, vielleicht fange ich damit einfach an, ganz herzlich begrüßen Peter Köttermann, der von der Baukultur in NRW auch heute einen Vortrag halten wird, und Herr Professor Peter Gurschwöter vom Museum Volkwang, auch er wird heute sozusagen einen Beitrag für unsere Diskussion machen. Und da bin ich eigentlich auch schon beim Ablauf. Wir werden jetzt gleich zwei Vorträge hören, nämlich einmal von ruangrupa online, auch in Englisch, und dann einen weiteren von Peter Köttermann, hier live in Deutsch, und dann ein Statement in Deutsch und Englisch, nehme ich an, von Herrn Professor Gurschwöter, der sozusagen zum Museum Volkwang und die Stadt und Öffentlichkeit sich positionieren wird. Und dann wollen wir erst einmal kurz im Podium mit den Anwesenden hier vorne diskutieren und öffnen dann aber natürlich die Diskussion auch für alle und für Fragen. Genau, vielleicht so viel zu den zu dem formalen Ablauf. Reza, I'm also going to make a short introduction and then I will hand over to you, okay? Okay, thank you. Okay, so, you see that? Okay. Ja, vielleicht nochmal zu unserem Thema in diesem Semester. Wir haben ja das Kolloquium, diese Reihe diesmal genannt, Being Public, Going Public. Und der Hintergrund ist, oder es geht um Methoden, Konzepte und Strategien der Stadtentwicklung im öffentlichen Raum, eben für die Region, für Stadt, für Land und aber auch für unseren Campus. Das heißt, wir wollen auch immer mal wieder Bezüge herstellen, was heißt eigentlich öffentlicher Raum und Öffentlichkeit für eine Universität. Und das natürlich auch so ein bisschen mit den Erfahrungen aus den letzten 2 Jahren, wenn dann hier plötzlich quasi gar nichts mehr ist. Also öffentlicher Raum ist und bleibt wesentlicher Bestandteil der europäischen Stadt. Und zugleich ist öffentlicher Raum stetig mit sich verändernden Konnotationen von Werten und Gebräuchen konfrontiert. Und ich beziehe mich jetzt für eine Bestimmung des öffentlichen Raums sehr gerne auf eine Definition von Marcel hinab, die Sie hier hinter mir auch schon sehen können, nämlich in der öffentlich heißt, für alle offen, allen bekannt und von allen anerkannt. Und in Europa denken wir bei dem Wesen des öffentlichen Raums, also der Öffentlichkeit an sich, eigentlich an das öffentliche Ideal der griechischen Polis, also in der die freien Stadtbürger, die wohl bemerkt nur einen kleinen Teil der Gesellschaft waren, in denen nämlich Frauen, Sklaven und Fremde eigentlich nicht eingeschlossen waren, die aber sozusagen die freien Stadtbürger öffentlich, das heißt für alle hörbar und nachvollziehbar Argumente austauschten, also sie diskutierten und so in Abwägung der einzelnen Argumente die Geschicke der Stadt und der Gesellschaft lenkten. Der Philosoph und Anthropologe Marcel Hinab bezeichnet eben diesen öffentlichen Raum der Diskussion und Debatte als Dispositiv von Beziehung. Der öffentliche Raum der griechischen Stadt ist für uns, wenngleich allzu oft idealisiert, vorbildlich geblieben. Es ist der Raum, wo die Mitglieder der Stadt nach vereinbarten Regeln vor aller Augen debattieren und Beschlüsse fassen. Öffentlich ist, was den Blicken der Gemeinschaft, ihrem Urteil und ihrer Zustimmung ausgesetzt ist. Wir verstehen seitdem den Begriff der Öffentlichkeit als das unauflösbare Band, das zwischen dieser Sichtbarkeit, dieser Transparenz und dem Urteil der Bürger geknüpft würde. Öffentlicher Raum ist also damit verbunden, nochmal Zitat, mit der Idee der offenen und widersprüchlichen Debatte, dazu bestimmt, eine durchdachte Vereinbarung in Bezug auf die Definition der Institutionen, der Formulierung der Gesetze und ihrer Anwendung zu ermöglichen. In dieser Beziehung heißt öffentlich, für alle offen, allen bekannt und von allen anerkannt. Genau. Und im Kontext von Stadtentwicklung ist Stadt und öffentlicher Raum eben mit Repräsentation und Aufschluss verbunden. Es gilt sozusagen demokratische Räume und Mitbestimmung zu behaupten, aber auch Repräsentation und Exklusivität genauso wie Inklusivität im Hinblick auf Zugänge, auf Player, Akteure, Prozesse und Möglichkeiten zu ermitteln. Viele, in der Tat nicht immer alle, sind an der Produktion von Stadt, öffentlichen Raum und seiner Konnotation beteiligt. Mal gezielt und fordernd, manches Mal vielleicht auch eher unbewusst. In diesem städtebaulichen Kolloquium wollen wir uns daher einen Überblick über verschiedene Positionen und Perspektiven erarbeiten und so eine Standortbestimmung des öffentlichen Raums in NRW, in Städten, in Gemeinden, auf dem Campus der TU selbst vornehmen. Wir schauen dabei aber nicht nur auf Institutionen in Nordrhein-Westfalen, sondern eben auch haben wir Gastbeiträge aus anderen Städten und von weiteren Projekten, wie heute Abend eben mit ruangrupa von der Documenta in Kassel. Insgesamt wird es 3 Veranstaltungen geben und heute darf ich Reza Afisina von ruangrupa begrüßen. Ebenso hatte ich schon gesagt, Peter Göttermann und Herr Peter Kurschwitter. So, und ich muss jetzt einmal kurz switchen hier. Genau, und wir werden dann in der Diskussion uns eben dann folgenden Fragen widmen. Also wie verstehen wir öffentlich? Was bedeutet öffentlicher Raum? Und welchen Beitrag soll dieser in Zukunft leisten? Und dabei wollen wir auch einen Blick auf bestehende und neue Entwicklungschancen werfen. So, und vorher schauen wir jetzt sozusagen uns an, wie das manche schon machen. Und der erste Teil ist dann dabei eben von Reza Afisina aus Kassel und ruangrupa. And I switched to English because now it's almost your part, Reza. So I'm very happy you are here with us tonight, even though because you are going to open this very important art show you are creating right now in almost only 4 weeks, I think. So I'm happy you found the time to share your projects and ideas and some thoughts with us tonight. Reza is a member of the art collective ruangrupa from Indonesia, and this group works on collaborative on art projects since 2000. It had worked with several biennales. I hope I pronounce them right, like Gwangju Biennale, Istanbul Biennale, Asia Pacific Triennale of Contemporary Art, Singapore Biennale, Sao Paulo Biennale, and the Aichi Triennale. And last but not least, the Shanghai Biennale in 2019. And now you are creating the Documenta 15 in Kassel, but you have also side projects like the Rural House in Kassel. And I'm interested in what you're going to show us tonight. And maybe to introduce you, studied film, and you work with performances and installations. And I found actually one quote from you, which is actually in German, but I want to read it in German, because I think it maybe explains a little bit the way how you work. And it says, wir kuratieren nicht. Wir nennen es aber lieber fermentieren, kompostieren oder zusammensetzen. Kuratieren, das ist so ein Machtding. Wir wollen lieber interagieren. In gewisser Weise zersetzen wir damit natürlich das alte System. Aber das ist nötig, um fortbestehen zu können. Für uns als Gruppe ist dieser Schritt einfacher als für eine einzelne Person. So I'm really happy you're here with us tonight, and we're gonna switch the screen to you and for you. So I think, do you want to share the slides yourself?
First of all, I would like to address many thanks for inviting us toward this contribution, even though via online. And then we are very happy that we are still connected, at least to regard what René's already mentions about our preparation so far, about for the Documentas 15, that in the upcoming 4 weeks. And we are very happy also together right now is Iswanto Hartono and Farid Rakum as a part of us ruangrupas that now already in Kassel. And the other part that mostly me and Iswanto, it's almost 2 years right now, generating and concentrating into direct connection to the things and to regard the things that happen in castles, and the way that we would like also to learn about many things that happen within the castles and its ecosystem, as we call it. So that's why we introduce our space in Ruru House, we call it, is a part of our living room, which is generating the way that how we also try to integrate more into focus within the process that happen in Castle directly. And also, first of all, we would like to apologize if in some of us articulations we cannot speak German very well, and we do our best to explain it more in English. So if there's any questions or partly the elaboration from each of every one of you, please feel free also to articulate within the Germans, and then hopefully someone could translated to us. So in the beginning, actually, ruangrupa, before our initiations as a artist collective, most of us already met each other's, or even we have like very long relationships during our college time back in the 90s. So most of us already know each other's ever since, and then that's why it's easy for us to like really integrate it to each other's when we starting to initiate ruangrupa and its activities. In general, ruangrupa actually is a collective artist, and we base living and working in Jakarta in the context of how we close to the response and in the several different various changes of urban life, and also to look toward the space in the city, in Jakarta, in Jakarta, in the context of Jakarta, for example, to find working strategies and through the proper and the relevant approach to our artistic practices, while we maintaining how fluidity in our working process. So that's why this our loop, the way that we learn so far to regard how we connect, to identify and positioning ourselves, and then how we also connected on the relevance or its closest approach to regard the space that we are concentrating, because our problem since the beginning of creating ourselves as ruangrupa actually is the space, because in Jakarta it is not that easy to find the space, especially in the working conditions as an artist, for example. Not only because the rent is very expensive, but also about its necessities. When you start to build a space, and then how this space also quite creating like a context that relate to its own practice, and then how to bring publics also as becoming part of your daily necessities, when many things engage with the different kind of conversations, and then how we try to formulate it, although there's no such thing as formulations within us practice so far. We just only continuing most of the steps that happen to regard our experiences. So in the other hands, this is what we do mostly. We always gather, we always using the term of hangout or squatting, and then we kind of like exploring different kind of conversations, and then most of the time we also creating or inviting different kind of activities that relate to us practices, also to acknowledge most of us neighboring societies, because like since 2000s when we initiated the first space for ruangrupa, actually we mostly every 2 years we have to move to find cheap rented places or house. I mean, we always starting from the house that we rent, and then we turn these notions of the house into more intimate space as to welcoming everyone. So we create this particular way on how we could as well generating into sense of stories, and also how us practice also relate to the things that happen in Jakarta within this context, for example. So for us to have like strategies at least in using the urban space, we call it in Jakarta, for its social interventions, while we also exploring new methods for us context in our practices, because we also involved and invited and contributing to the art event, for example. We get invited, and then we also to have to showing our own way of working in this particular context, and to make use of the public space mostly to the fullest extent, because this is our practice. When we see like different characteristic, and then we generate more into these stories, and then we have like different kind of stories that relate to us neighboring societies, then it's much to our ingredients. And then we because Jakarta is really important ingredients for us, so that's why we mostly concentrating to the things that happen in Jakarta within the involvement like within the peoples, within the movement, within the mobilities, and also to understanding about, as you know, Indonesians is a big archipelago. So to understand people that living in Jakarta, coming from different directions, and then also different regions, different ethnicities, and different background. Most of them come to Jakarta or went to Java as a part of these urbanizations or as a part of chasing their dreams into big cities. That's this kind of experiences of people's mobility that come from different social, economy, and cultural background has created a diverse behavior and also group of different communities. So that's why for us to create ourselves becoming understand to these mapping strategies, you know, as a part of how we would like to see this hybrid behavior as well, social realms that influence one to another's. So we try to make it more into relationships. We always open to the sense like on how we would like to work together, on how we would try to introduce to each other, and then not to centralize ourselves as becoming, let's say, art center or something like that, but we are mostly share our resources since the beginning of time, because we need also to learn from different resources. So this kind of like interactions, not only in the relation of transactional, but also in the relations of how we have sufficiency to also contribute and distributing as well, accepting different kind of knowledge as a practice. And 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 that's the way that how we also kind of like considering public in the sense of our practice together, because most of the public in our experience, while we sit it into different neighborhood because we have to move, many of them could acknowledge us ruangrupa. It's depend on them expectation. Some of them could call us like a painting studios or production house or youth center or something like that. We don't mind about this because this character of identifying is related to their own personal memories and they have their own landmark. That's why it's generating different kind of stories within us practices, which is that's really good for us because that's have a sense for on how us as a collective also evaluating the way that we work, the way that we approach into broader public scape, and in particular the way how public could criticize what so-called collective of working, for example. So we create like different kind of gesture on how we collect, gather, and a very loose sense on generating different kinds of conversations within any elements that comes up in the notions of Jakarta's as their own home and their own space, and then generating also to be curious, to be interrogating, examining as a part, acknowledging the social symptom, for examples, and how we also try to mostly use and share our space also with them. So it's not like really necessary we create a program, but to have someone who hosted us in our space, that's also very necessary because we would like to acknowledge different kind of characteristic, the way that how they brought their share different kind of models, not only in the relation of art and cultures, but also in the relation to different gesture in the social approach, especially to the cities in Jakarta. So, as a cultural space, actually, dialogue as well as productions, distributions, and share of knowledge could occur. So, engaging with this widest landscape of art and cultural productions, and also involving the public within the arena of production, such as artists, students, societies, inter or multidisciplinaries, communities and organizations, workings in the art and culture, also embed with the social field and their involvement that could contribute to the contemporary art discourse as what we needed by its necessities. That's why space for us it's really important also because that's our starting point to make them feel comfortable, to make them feel safe in the sense of how they could relate to most of our activities, considering a home, considering bigger spaces, and also to discover some channels, at least to fill in the gap, like to acknowledge different kind of positions that happens around us. That's also very important. How we to get inspiration with, for example, and then how to activate and also to embed with different kind of practice that we could have our own gesture to support each other and becoming our own supporting system, let's say. And since the beginning, we are happy to see on how we could manage also to relate with different kind of other collective that involve within us. And then these evolutions of turning the space to us needed, it's also to as a part of a mapping assessment the current phenomena of a space and the public in the context of the relationship with different kind of so-called art practice and in social, cultural, and also political context. And for sure, you know already that how it changed during this pandemic. For example, how the space also create their own way to develop within this kind of like particularly online and partly like how Rural House in the context of us approach to castle also have like similarities to the things that happen in ruangrupa for ruangrupa in Jakarta. So actually, it's kind of like it's not like a new thing. The things that we did here with Rural House or within the documenta, within our method of approach, actually, it's kind of like part of how we continuing our method of our work so far back in Jakarta in the context. So what we need to find here is also partly like how we try to simulate to regard different kind of approach that we need so far in the sense on generating the things that happen in castle. And yes, we also challenging our way of thinking about how to work into different contexts, different communities, and also how to engage with the different societies, especially here when we are start to living and working directly from castle, and also acknowledging different kind of methods and the way that we would like to share the things that we are already working so far. But what we consider is everyone is a resource to us, and hopefully they could see us in the same directions that we also could become could becoming part of their resource. So we could like really exchanging the way that we needs and the way that we are practicing. So that's could be from my side to introduce on how we are working and practicing. And I guess hopefully Iswanto and Farid could add on some of the some of my introductions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and hello, Rene, and hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with all of you. And unfortunately, Farid has to live with her babies, but he's joining in this important and send the warm greetings to all of you. Again, I'm sorry for long. But I just add maybe shortly from Reza presentation, which I think is already completed. I just add maybe a bit that in relation with the topics, one is about being public, going public. Mostly like the slide that already shown by Reza. One thing is because within our context, ruangrupa, since the day it was born, we always domicile in a housing rent house in Jakarta, and we moved several times, which is always so one house to another house. And I think since beginning the idea is to convert and play between the domestic and the public. So yeah, it's not so easy in Jakarta to get to space. Will be like here in Europe, you have lots of factory in the middle of city and so on, and even the art space, cultural space. But Jakarta, we don't have any infrastructure for that, so means that we have to create our own. So the idea is, I mean, through all the years, this more than 20 years, I think we play with those borders between domestic and public, and how to convert and being public in a domestic space, let's say. And And this already mentioned by Reza that that's related with the politics during the regime as well, where freedom of speech, freedom of gathering, so on was very limited. So when the regime fell, then so how I think many conversion from the organization NGO artist initiative spaces was happening mostly on the same manner as well. And not all for sure, but I think one of the things that happened with less funded spaces, that we have to be really in the middle of city doing this. Even some are having more smaller. They do in the hostel, in the just small single room, and that they convert it to art space and so on. So. The other thing is, throughout the years as well, it was manifest in many of our projects. I think, let's say, when we invited for Biennale, Triennale, and so on. And we do as well enlarge the border between the private institution and then museum, let's say, and we play with the borders between the public and as well. Like I think, for example, just to give one, what we had in Pompidou, because to enter, then you have to buy ticket for publics. It's not a free entry. Then when we invited them, then we think of how to play with the borders to let's say to transform our given space for the exhibition and how to relate it and being a public space, let's say. Of course, we have to find a way that somehow we play with the facade, with the glass, which can be accessible in both ways. So people, even if they cannot enter, they can be participated by working on the large glass facade in front of Pompidou Center. So the work is inside and outside, but then this ambient, this gray area, this border between being public and private, main concern, as Reza said as well. And even like I think we have one project in Singapore Biennale that we're trying to convert our space, become a radio station, but it won't be happen because there are no live radio. So it means the question, no live radio in Singapore actually, so everything has to be screened. So then the question become where the public, private censorship and so on. So this is main concept, and somehow sometimes it really doesn't work at all. And we cancel the project because it's really not makes sense for us to do a screening censored radio. Then so we play a lot with this borders, with this area where between public, museum, and, let's say institution and domestic as well, and the tension between public and private, and public and institution. Maybe then we can discuss on this later. Thank you.
Maybe in the end we are a bit hard to understand actually. But let me try to maybe.
I think you're still muted for me.
Yes, I am, but now I'm not. Sorry. I'm here. I'm a bit confused with this online and live thing. Sorry. So what I said was the last part of Iswanto was sadly a bit bad to understand. I think. Yes, I think most people are nodding here. So I would like to try to translate at least a bit of it into German. Oh, what I got. So just for a second. Also was beide gesagt haben, aber Iswanto Hartono, ich hatte ihn eben nicht vorgestellt, weil er quasi auf dem Extra Screen ist, also er ist auch Teil von ruangrupa und sitzt quasi dort in seinem Büro in der Documenta im Ruhehaus. Und ich gebe jetzt ein bisschen Kontext, weil das Ruhehaus ist ein ehemaliges Kaufhausgebäude, eine Sporthalle, das mitten in der Innenstadt in Kassel ist und einfach nur ein Steinwurf von dem Hauptevent der zukünftigen Documenta der Kunstausstellung entfernt, dem Fridericianum. Und sie haben dort seit 2 Jahren Platz bezogen, um sozusagen mit ihrer Praxis, wie sie eigentlich Kunst machen und Stadt entwickeln, auch wirklich vor Ort zu sein. Aber das alles mit dieser Herausforderung, dass man natürlich jetzt während Corona, also Reza und Iswanto sind die beiden, die auch wirklich seit 2 Jahren in Deutschland in Kassel leben, aber man durfte ja quasi, kennen sie ja alle, nichts machen. Also das heißt, was sie eigentlich machen, also Beziehungen aufbauen, rausgehen mit den Nachbarn, also zur Nachbarschaft, die einladen und in dieser Grenze zu arbeiten, was ganz häufig Iswanto am Ende gesagt hat, also die Grenze zwischen Domestic und Public. Also das ist eigentlich ein Thema, mit dem sie arbeiten, indem sie diese Grenzen eigentlich verschwimmen lassen und es auch, indem man zu einer Ressource wird, also indem sie versuchen, dass das, was sie machen, eigentlich eine Ressource, also einmal für sich selbst ist, um sich selbst gegenseitig zu supporten, aber auch eine Ressource für die Nachbarschaft, in der man ist, möglichst sozusagen. Man hat das vielleicht ein bisschen gesehen, es gab in dem Vortrag von Reza dieses Public Viewing Event und er meinte, es ist teilweise sagen Leute in der Nachbarschaft, wenn man sie fragt, was wir sind, dann sagen sie, oh, Malstudios oder vielleicht ein Jugendclub und das ist ihnen aber egal, sie müssen jetzt nicht als Kunstkollektiv erkannt werden, sondern es geht eigentlich darum, dass die Leute in ihrer Erinnerung Beziehungen aufbauen zu dem Ort. Und ob das jetzt in der eigenen Erinnerung als Jugendclub ist oder als Artstudio, das ist eigentlich egal, es geht um die Beziehung, mit der gearbeitet wird, also zwischen den Menschen, die sie als Kollektiv aufbauen. Und eben die Herausforderung, ich denke, das hat Iswanto am Ende versucht, viel zu erklären, jetzt sozusagen, weil manchmal klappt das auch nicht und natürlich dieses Herausarbeiten aus dem indonesischen Kontext, wo sie sehr, sehr lange, eben seit 2000, also über 20 Jahre arbeiten, das jetzt in einem europäischen Kontext in Kassel auch zu machen, plus sozusagen Corona. Und dann solche Ideen zu finden, wie kann man denn trotzdem zur Ressource werden, wie kann man so ein wirklich großes Art-Event, das ja auch in Zwängen ist, es muss ja auch Geld verdienen, man muss ja Eintritt nehmen zum Beispiel und gleichzeitig wird Kunst als Ressource verstanden, die eigentlich jedem zugänglich sein soll. Wie kann man denn an diesem Konflikt arbeiten? Und da hatte Iswanto ein Beispiel genannt, dass sie zum Beispiel in diesem Ruhehaus, das ist ja ein altes Kaufhaus, das heißt, es hat große Schaufensterflächen, und sie haben Gruppen eingeladen oder Künstler eingeladen, dass sie tatsächlich dann in und auf diesen Schaufenstern arbeiten, sodass die Kunst von innen und von außen sichtbar ist. Und damit sozusagen, man kann dafür bezahlen und reingehen und sie von innen schauen. Ich kann sie aber auch von außen sehen und damit wird es eine Ressource für alle. Sodass man das vielleicht so ein bisschen versteht, was eben gesagt wurde. Und es gab auch was, ich glaube, ihr habt versucht, eine Radiostation auch aufzubauen, aber ich glaube, das hat nicht funktioniert. Das habe ich jetzt auch selber nicht ganz akkurat verstanden. Aber vielleicht so viel ja, zum Ergänzen. Das ist, glaube ich, ein bisschen verständlicher dann geworden. Ja? Okay, sorry. So it was a short translation of your presentation. Thank you. So I don't know. Maybe are there direct questions because maybe it's hard to remember everything you heard in English for our later discussion. So if you have any questions now, I would take them now and give them to Reza und Iswanto. Also wenn es Fragen gibt, jetzt gerade Verständnisfragen, wenn ihr euch irgendwas gefragt habt, da war ein Begriff. Nein. Okay. Immer ein bisschen gucken. Okay, so I would say once again, thank you.
It's interesting to talk a little bit about domestics. So I'm not sure that the meaning of domestic.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Could you expand a little bit about or talk a bit about the meaning of domestic and the relation to public? Is that maybe you could go a bit deeper into that?
Sorry, the question to us, really? The question to us or to us?
To us,
So,
to us. About domestic and the connection to public. Yeah.
Start first. So
I guess because of the relations, yeah. I mean, like in these relations on, like that's why that's why on how we engage mostly with the space itself in the beginning, we always thinking about house. Uh, First, house is quite accommodating in the sense on how we are living, so it's becoming home. And then we mostly try hard to make our space also becoming home to them when we hosted something all together. That's the thing. So aside of we generating living room, actually we try to mostly open to the things of our context to use these particular structures as a house and becoming home to most of our dear friends that coming. And this is the sense that how we use this term of domestic, like, because it's a house actually, and then we live there. It's kind of like a regular normal house, and then we don't even change anything, like aside of transforming like the some of the corner or even our bedroom into something that could be accommodating. For example, once we had a room for artists in residency, let's say. That's our dedicated space or room for some artists that we invited to come and also have a residency in our space. But it also could change into the gallery presentation, for example, or perhaps our kitchens. Sometimes it's also changed into a seminar room or our backyard. It could be like for hangout or also partly to show some artwork there. So this is the sense then on how us playing also with this gesture of on the notions like what is public, because like Iswanto mentions, like we mostly grew up in the New Order regime, when most of the New Order regimes also using societies, communities, and public space to control most of us. So this is kind of like questioning the notions about their practice as authorities to control everything that mostly happen in the so-called public space. And then when New Order regime start to fall down back in '98, as a part of, we also involved with the student college movement, and then suddenly these questions about public space is suddenly appear in our context, like when we start to do public intervention, for example, because beforehand there's no such thing of this practice in the public space could occur. So that's why it's very difficult for us to position ourselves if we would like to use or to be embedded with our own public space during the New Order regime. It's kind of like bit difficult to negotiate mostly with the authorities. But we find out that when we start to come directly from intimate space, like very personal space like house, and then suddenly it's much more easy for us to like really engage with the broader public sense because they feel safe in our place, something like that. So this is probably the ones that we would like to elaborate. Perhaps this is also could be as a different context within your practices so far, but at least we could have some effort toward this involvement within us practices started from the house that we are living in. Because what we believe that our most important notions actually is to regard daily narrations. And then that's the thing that why we started living in the very close societies, or we are living or practicing directly from house, for example, like that. And then that's mostly our practice up until now. So perhaps Iswanto would like also to address more into detail to regard this domestic and public. Thank you.
The word domestic, I mean, is really in terms of with the urban context in Jakarta is really in a house where people live. I think we don't have so many, since actually because the development of the cities is really back up, but also only support for the economy during the 80s, I think. And as I mentioned before, that there are very less cultural support space kind of for the artists. It's really even, I mean, zero. We don't have, and museum. I mean, there are lots of museums, but it's not like here with contemporary art. Well, there are more, let's say, ethnographic and historical initiatives. But in terms of culture, it's really hard, really less, and so the most common things is a shop houses model where people can live, but they can open a shop together with a house. So this is one very specific model of development which is happening throughout almost all cities. It's called rumah toko, or shop houses. And there's another type which is bungalow. Let's say one landed housing, and apartment is they started maybe only in the late 90s. There are very one old bits, but it stopped in the 70s. But the most then now is started in the late 90s, where all this apartment is. So the city was really spread out with a low-rise housing development, mostly bungalow type landed housing. So that's why the city was the distance is the city is so huge. Distance is for commuters is so far. I mean that's why where the traffic jam started, because everyone picked the cars. And yeah, one chance for us like young artists at the time for us for sure to have a space is the only chance is we got a cheap rent, which is mostly housing, which is domestic for living then. And the question is how to convert this into common public or let's say a common space. And for us, maybe what's happening is quite interesting because being public means there are two as well, which is really public, but our ecosystem as well. I think so. The before when ruangrupa is the enlargement of the ecosystem where it's also, let's say, become public, but it's still within our communities, which is growing up every day, and then during the event, maybe that is really where the public, which is outsiders, really come and visit the space. But the distance between the ecosystem where actually all the support for how the space run and everything's work there running during the event and support like every day with the exchange, with the sharing of let's say working together and so on and support each other. So that's happening. All the support system was come from the arts ecosystem that ruangrupa was built for many years. So yeah, so I think something like that maybe really this context between the domestic and the movement context in Jakarta.
Okay, thank you. So ich brauche wieder ein Mikrofon. Okay, so thanks. So I think because we have the subtitles running and you're getting like your subtitles are always wrong, so it's hard to follow actually. Sorry for that. I thought it would be easier. Yeah, so thank you for this elaboration. It was about ecosystems and the growing of ecosystems also within the house and within the society. But there's one question. Yeah. Ich kann erkennen, Sie kuratieren das auch, aber ich frage das nochmal. So the question, here's one question for you. So what is your, like, could you make concrete, what do you offer in the documenta? Like, do you offer a house for artists to live in, private publicly, or could you maybe make that a bit, maybe you have an example how to make this. What is your, contribution? Yeah, what is your contribution as for the documenta and for the artists coming?
I think mostly our contribution is to share, because we believe that each of every one of us living and working in the several different ecosystem, as you know it, perhaps. And also we know that each of every one of them have sufficiency to distribute their own practices. So actually it's not matter about structures anymore. It's much more about how we have way to articulate the sense of sharing and distribute most of our practices. For sure, it's related to most of these articulations that came from the artists. But actually, if you read a lot right now up until our process, like our approach or our method actually is a lumbung, which is it is in Indonesian's context, is related mostly to this traditional way of working. But actually, at the present time, even let's say what so-called modern societies, as we name it, like this practice of sharing and generating distributed or even sharing resources, it's still happening up until now. So that's why when we addressing or introduce our sense to our approach, or let's say by your saying about contributions, actually partly our contribution is also to let most of our artist friends, and also partly the way that we think about documenta as a resource, then this is the times that we share different kind of method by not having mechanical conversions, but more into this how they naturally engage within aesthetic in commons. For example, let's say different kind of practice that happen to our dear friends in Seoul, for example, South Korea, how they could as well have like these notions or sharing about this into the sense of agricultural levels within the context of colonialism, for example, that happened in the east part. Or let's say the way that cinema caravan from Japan working closely to this directly into their local anchor in Suji, for example, how they relate the beach community or in the shore way or social gesture is also happening that relate sometimes to the narrations that coming from the big city like Tokyo, for example. So that's the thing that we try to learn most of this kind of practice. Actually, that's not a new thing, because the way that we practicing so far for almost 2 years now directly from Kassel, actually we have similarities, but for sure it's different articulation. Some of it could be directly in the sense of art or even culture, but some of them are actually it's being embedded to the most of the things that happen in this Kassel and its ecosystem. So actually is this, again, this is not a new thing, but this is the way that how we would like also to grasp a different character with different identity and different positions. And again, ever since that we came from the artistic context, because we are also an artist, so our approach is mostly to the art and culture and its activism. But we also having different point that we address could be very important, like acknowledging different kind of practice within the shared educations and distributions of knowledge. And then the third is the how we also would like to see about the circular model of economy as a part of our supporting system. Because as you know, as an artist, as a collective, or as well as individual, we have chance also to see how us growing in the certain ecosystem and how we develop supporting system altogether, also concerning about the economical way of thinking. So this is this kind of practice actually the way that we try to introduce, not only from us as an artistic director for documenta or within ruangrupa or within our ecosystem in Jakarta, but as far as we now engage with the different friends or artists that invited to documentas, although some of them even individuals, but they have like collective thoughts, not only collective way of working, but they also have like collective thoughts, like they also thinking collectively, because the sense of building up supporting system, that's the way that we need as a part of the ecosystem. And then how we supporting each other, that's very important.
Thanks. Okay. So I got this. So it's more about. Maybe I can't really. Also hast du es verstanden oder muss ich es nochmal zurück übersetzen? Yeah? Okay, thank you. So maybe we could also, because I think it's an important point of you talking about this, you just said like it's a collective thinking and not only a collective practice, so it's like deep within to kind of share or contribute to this ecosystem you're trying to develop also within Documenta as a resource. And that's maybe also interesting because, like, of course, the art event of, but now we're almost in the discussion, the art of event of the Documenta is, of course, a public event, right? So, and if you try to use this as a resource, so the notion of public, it's a bit hard, the notion of public getting private, because you have a collective art practice which kinds of try to hops or jumps over the border of private and public by inviting you in a private home. I think that's a bit tricky, but might be the key to it, what was meant. So, but maybe we can discuss this deeper in the discussion later.